Fabulous.
Yes.
Oh, we're live.
Yay.
Hi,
Hello.
hello, world. We're live here at the EQUUS studio at Thunderbird Ridge in Santa Fe, New Mexico, and I am joined by Leah Goldman. Leah is a newly minted EQUUS Experience Certified Facilitator. She recently, not that recently, but a few months ago, received her certification. It's a really big process. And Leah is a very robust member of our team, of our herd. Keep an eye out for her because she is going to be figuring large in the EQUUS community. I just can see it happening. So we thought today, Leah and I would just have a chat. We were going to talk shop. Hey, Leah.
Yes. And I will say, I received my certification a year ago.
Wow. It just seems like 2 months ago.
I know. Time flies.
Yeah. Well, so I do want to talk shop with you. I would love for people to hear about a few things to do with just how the industry of equine assisted coaching as you see it.
Okay.
And I guess I want to start this with because I know you and I experience this a lot. When you're at a cocktail party and people say, "What do you do?" And you say, "I'm an equine assisted coach," or "I'm an executive coach," or "I'm a coach and I work with horses." What's sort of, what do you find happens immediately once you say those things?
Yeah. Generally, people are very interested.
Mm-hmm.
It is a unique line of work and it invites a lot of questions right off the bat. One of the questions I get a lot is, am I a coach for humans or am I a coach for horses? So sometimes it gets mistaken for equine training or working with people more in the athletic riding arena. So making that distinction that we are helping humans with looking at themselves and what's going on in their lives through the partnership of horses. And that generally opens up quite a large discussion and conversation. At least that's what I found in my experience.
Mm-hmm. I mean, I find that people often, everybody's well-meaning, of course, but for me, the moment I say the word horse, people immediately go kind of into their biases or a sort of slipstream in their brain that's like equine therapy. Oh,
Yeah.
you must do therapy with horses or work with trauma or,
Right.
and so how do you handle just clarifying that? Or it sounds like way upstream, you've sort of got a way to kind of derail that piece from the get-go.
Yeah, sometimes I actually use that, what you're saying, as an entry point for people to have a base or an understanding, but then very quickly clarify that it's not therapy. So the way that I describe it actually is kind of using myself as an example. So I say, I was looking for something for someone like myself who was highly functioning in the world, but had a few areas that I really wanted to look at. And, I love horses and I love nature and being outside. And how do I find something like this? Because I'm not somebody who is in the deep trenches of needing help and support. And I was like, God, there's got to be so many people out there that are in this same position. And for me, I had also worked as a school guidance counselor, and I had worked with populations that were much more intense in what people were facing and what people were struggling with. So when I speak about it in a way that those things are amazing and they are necessary. But what about the people that are kind of, I guess, in the middle for a lack of, right? So there are people who ride and there are people who are in the equine world in tons of other capacities, but from the human standpoint, from the emotional standpoint, and I just sort of explain, coaching really looks at where you're going, and it's for the person who is ready to change, who wants to change, who wants to look at themselves. And I'm very blunt and direct, as you know, in my in the way that I carry myself. And so I just sort of put it out there that this is for the person who wants to change, and that's not for everybody in that moment in their life. And so generally it attracts a different person, and that seems to be like a really shiny object for people, and they gravitate towards that.
Yeah. I think about the book title From Good to Great. And when I think about coaching, it comes from, and my experience of being coached, it comes from a place of sort of robust inner sense of self, and knowing that things are good and I could actually reach for more. How good can I stand it? What's in my way? Are there even greater levels of joy I can reach, greater levels of purpose, more abundance and wealth even? So it's a very, like you say, it's a very forward-looking. And so you talked about what you were looking for. Share with me how you got into this gig of equine coaching.
Oh gosh, it's a long journey, but I'll do my best to sum it up. But it starts with just being in love with horses from a very young age. I mean, that's really that is the piece that holds all of this together. And so I think you may relate to this. It's just that something that's born in you. And there's a difference between those of us who love horses and kind of admire them from afar, and those of us who love them and do something with it and do it our whole lives. And that was me from a very young age. And it's woven in and out. There were times in my life where horses weren't present, but it wasn't for long. So when they weren't present, it felt very much like there was a gap or something not there for me. And then I always kind of knew in some capacity I wanted to help people or serve people. And so I thought I wanted to do that in schools and with kids and teenagers. And I did do that for a little bit. And I also did work in the clinical mental health side of things as well. And my world got upended a little bit, and I ended up going to work for my family's business, which is in the health and fitness space. And I got to learn, marketing and advertising and how a business runs and operates. And that was, I did that full time I'm still there part time, but for about 7 or 8 years. And then I, of course, I say, of course, because a lot of people know my story who may be tuning in, and you know it, sort of had my big life-changing moment where everything sort of stopped. And I really had to look at, okay, at that moment in time, I was like, I'm going to stay focused and I'm going to make sure I have a routine. Having the education and the experience I had working in the mental health industry, I had a lot of tools and I had a lot of resources, which I'm very grateful for. And I knew right off the bat that I could not make any massive life-changing decisions at that moment. But what I could do was just start to take small steps in figuring out what it was I did want to do.
And what you're talking about, because I know a lot of people that are listening do know your story, but a lot don't. Life came in with a cataclysmic event, right? And sort of T-boned you. And so we can catch people up to speed. Yeah.
Yes, exactly. And in a way where you very clearly see your life could diverge into 2, if not more paths, or could stay the same. And for me, staying the same did not feel like a good option. And so I kept the steady path, but then sort of started bringing in other pieces. And so it's when that cataclysmic event happened, horses had not been in my life for a few years. But 2 weeks before the event happened, I had signed on to lease a horse for that summer. And so it was incredibly serendipitous, the universe totally working, in my favor, that I had this reprieve and this sanctuary to go to 3 times a week, where I got to spend time with this horse. And even greater than that, this was at like somebody's home. It was a private property. And so I didn't have a big barn with lots of people coming and going. It was like a truly private place where I got to grieve and, and also charge forward and whatever I needed to do that day. And so that kind of got the wheels turning as far as wanting to go back to helping people more in the mental emotional space, recognizing how much being with the horses was helping me, which was different than the capacity I had been with horses before.
Right.
And this horse, it was a mare. And as we know, mares are, they have hard opinions on things often. And they have a way of being very gentle with you, but also, for lack of a better term, and excuse my language, but this way of being like, get your shit together.
Yeah. They're really, they're very uncompromising in that way, for sure.
Yes. And so she kind of, to me, was like a Sour Patch Kid, right? It was like
she didn't hold you small, is what I'm hearing.
No.
Right. She's
no,
like, I know
sweet.
you're hurting, and
exactly. Yeah. And she was sweet when she needed to meet, or when I needed her to be sweet. And then, she had her moments of like, come on, let's go. And so between her and my dog at the time, who's no longer with us, but she was a huge part of the healing as well, because that gave me structure and routine. Got to get up, you got to get outside. You have to care for this being that needs you. So that was all part of the healing process. And then through some connections of mine, somebody else that was doing this work, who I grew up horseback riding with, I hadn't spoken to her in years, but all it takes sometimes is a quick message. And it was like, come down to my farm right away, and I was sitting in a pasture with 3 horses and her. It was the middle of January, 20 degrees outside. And we sat there for, I think, 2.5 hours. And it was just like, this is it. Like, this is it. This is what I need to do. And so all the pieces started to fall into place as far as choosing to become a coach, as opposed to getting my license as a therapist, which was also a possibility.
Right. A big choice point there, right?
Huge.
You're a therapist, right?
Huge. But ultimately, and it's funny because when I was in school, coaching, the coaching industry, while it may still be this, it's getting better. It was so unregulated.
It was,
at that time. And it was very looked down upon. And so for me to make the mental switch to go from having all this training and all of this education and the money that I put into it and the time and the internships, and to go this direction was, it took some time to make that choice, but I'm so glad I did.
Yeah.
So glad I did. So and that ultimately led me to this work and to you.
Well, you had this crisis. The horse sort of magically showed up in your life. You experienced your own healing journey through the horse. And then also through that, had this natural evolution of being in service in the way that you had felt the horses, and later your friend practitioner were in service to you as well. That's so fantastic.
Yeah.
You're talking about the coaching industry, and now, with thanks to the International Coach Federation, we do have, thank God, some very strict and clear levels of care, ethics we have to adhere to, structures and guidelines. The testing process is, as you know, incredibly rigorous, which I'm happy for, because those of us that have taken the effort to be formally trained are carrying that robust education, sort of like people can get ordained as a minister by a weekend online course, or they can go to Harvard Divinity School, and the two are not the same.
Right.
One of the things that folks may or may not know is that in order to even apply for the EQUUS certification, you have to have over 1,000 hours of horse experience, and you have to be certified as a coach, both. Before we'll even train you. And so in that way, we ensure that the people who are certified with EQUUS hold both masteries really well, the mastery of the human heart and the mastery of the horse heart. And you have to have both. And not all equine assisted processes hold both with that
Right.
level of rigor and standard of practice. What was it like for you to kind of, because it's not every day someone shows up with those two pieces in place, and then on top of it adds a certification, on top of those two mastery levels. What was that like for you?
Oh gosh. Well, I'm going to fangirl a little bit here because when I first talked to you, I felt like I was talking to a celebrity.
Oh,
So, I had heard, you on a podcast, and then I picked up your book, and in the work that we're doing and EQUUS is doing, that was a piece that was missing. So what it was like for me was like I had these two different tracks and was not clear on how to combine them.
right.
And so when I heard you speak and when I read your words, it was like, oh my gosh, who is this woman? She is saying everything that I myself have not been able to put into words myself or figure out how to combine. Which of course led me to your site and then reaching out. And here we are now having this conversation almost probably 2.5 years later, which is crazy. But I had a decent base level of confidence, just based on my training and my education and my experience. It was actually really the horse piece where I had less confidence. And that took some practice because I had to unlearn a lot of what I had learned in my 30 plus years of riding, some which still pertains, but a lot that doesn't. And my horse, Saint, who I got 3 years ago, has been an excellent, excellent teacher of that for me. And really being able to slow down and focus on the relationship and tuning into him, as opposed to you go to the barn, you get your horse, you tack up, you ride, you leave. And it's like, that's not everyone's experience, but for a lot of us, that's the experience.
Yeah.
And you kind of jump from horse to horse. And this was the first time where I actually thought about this today. I was out cleaning his paddock, and I was just like, I'm just hanging here. Like, I'm just like a part of this, and it's just this felt sense that's hard to describe, where you're so immersed in their world and their energy, and it feels so natural, like nothing could happen to you or nothing could go wrong.
Yeah.
Which is not an experience that a lot of people have had with horses.
Yeah. Or life.
Life. Yeah, or life.
Yeah.
And so through our time together and training with you, I think when I first came to you, I was like, okay, I need like 20 exercises that I can do with life.
Yes.
It was all about the doing, right? It was like I felt like I had to have a playbook of all of these things for people to do. And if I didn't, it would fail. And come to find out, I hardly ever do those exercises. And most of the time we're just there observing, and, what comes of it comes with it. Sometimes that we do those things because they are useful and they're meaningful and helpful.
Right.
But yeah, that was a total mind shift for me, just all of the doing versus just being.
Yeah. I mean, being is so much a part of this, being a coach, period, that we talk about coaching presence, but also of being an equine coach, because of the field. We have to, we have to be in this enormous space where so much is happening. We've got something happening with the horse, something happening with our client, and it's all in the beingness. And I love that you highlight this difference, because, there's people talk about there's sort of transactional coaching, where what do you want to get out of your session today? And how do you measure those outcomes? And it's all kind of very formulaic, which is not our style. We are very much about attuning to the client, listening for the emergent process that's wanting to happen, it's a very vulnerable position to be in, right? Because you
Mhm.
don't know where the client is going to take that session. And it's the same with our relationship with the horse. I think you and I both had such a sea change in our dynamic with horses, because so many of us had that power over
Yeah.
conventional approach to horsemanship, and to really meet the horse as a fellow being, as a brother or sister, and be in a listening, relating, mutualism with our horse is so
Mhm.
powerful. In 2024, I'm going to open up the EQUUS certification to making it, instead of one-on-one, we'll have a cohort of 3 to 5 people.
Oh, wow.
And so I'm realizing, as we're talking right now, that I'll probably want them to listen, people who are interested in the program, to listen to this conversation.
Mhm.
And one of the things that I love about what you do is, in the certification, we're not looking for a bunch of cookie cutter folks who are just going to disappear themselves behind the EQUUS brand. And you have found a way. And I think a lot of our practitioners look to you, Leah, because they're like, how
Mhm.
does Leah do that? She has her own, FICA coaching,
Mhm.
your own brand. You have your own whole platform, social media. You're a magician on social media. And you very much hold the integrity of your brand, and at the same time you pair with our faculty inside of EQUUS and their brand. And I'm probably throwing you a bit of a hardball, but how do you do that? Tell me a little bit more about that for you.
Ooh, I mean, it's kind of like a no-brainer for me
Okay.
personally. Um, I think part of it is just so much because I believe in what EQUUS stands for.
Mm,
And in all of the teachings, and if you haven't read Kelly's book, even if you're not a horse person, it doesn't matter. It's so relevant to life, and just those core principles of, peace, freedom, joy, connection, and safety. And so often, for us to have all of those in balance is incredibly hard.
mm,
And so within that framework, it was such an easy transition to take everything that I had learned with you, and I'm still learning, and apply that to my own teachings. And I think what's just different is literally just logistically how we operate,
mm,
a lot of the times,
mm,
So my setup is different than yours in Santa Fe, and I found a way to make that work. And when I've talked to other people that are interested in this work, whether they're related to the EQUUS community or not. And what I speak about is like, this is trial and error, and it's still trial and error a lot of the time.
yeah.
But the foundation and the values and the core principles stay the same.
Mm-hmm.
So it's finding what works for you in your setup.
Yeah.
I have one horse. You have 5 horses and 2 donkeys. Is that right? 5 and 2?
Yeah.
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 Right. And so it's like, there's a part of you that's like, well, how do I do what she does? But then you have to realize, I don't have that setup, right? I have what
Right.
I have,
Right.
and I'm going to make that work for me. But
Yeah.
the language in which we speak and the way in which we hold the space, that is what stays consistent. So I think that's how I've managed to make it work.
Yeah, that's a great way to say it. So, and if people wanted to find you, because you're on the East Coast,
Yes, I am.
not everyone can come to Santa Fe.
Yeah.
Um, how do people find you, and you and Saint,
Yes.
who is a saint?
Yes, he
Um,
is.
yeah, how do they find you?
So if you Google my name, there's a whole page of goodies that comes up now, thankfully. And you can always go to my website, which is Fika, Fika. Some people say FICA, but it's pronounced Fika, which is a
Fika.
Swedish.
Yeah, I apologize.
No,
Fika.
that's okay. It happens all the time. But it's a Swedish concept, and it's totally not related to horses, but I made it related to horses.
And what is it? What's Fika?
It's a ritual that they practice in Sweden and in some other Scandinavian countries, where people take a fika break. So every day they stop work and they go and they enjoy the company of others, or with themselves. Generally, it's over coffee and cake, which are two of my favorite things personally. So that just made a lot of sense. But it was really sort of the message underneath it, right? It's this pause in the day, enjoying the company that you're with, and being grateful to have that time in that space. And so to me, I felt like I feel like I am in no greater company than when I am with horses.
Right.
And so that's why I sort of adopted that. So if you go to fikacoaching.com, you can find me, or you can find me on LinkedIn, or you can find me on Instagram, which is just my full name, which is Leah Elena Goldman. Because on there, it's a little bit more, not just about the business, but just sort of about who I am and my life. And it's a little bit more of an open share if people are interested in that.
Terrific. And Kelsey, who's in the studio, who's our Chief Storytelling Officer at EQUUS, if you could throw those things in the chat for us, that would be terrific. And I guess where I think I want to close is just if you could share with us, what kind of lifestyle does an equine assisted coach have? What's it like out there?
Oh gosh, do you want like the brutally honest answer?
Let's do brutally honest and then the perks.
Yeah, okay. Well, I think when you are a coach, what many people will tell you is that it's one thing to know how to work with humans and work with horses in our case. It's another thing to know how to run a business. So that is sort of, and for some people, that's an upside. For some of us, that is a harder part of the job. And so, all those little behind the scenes things that people don't necessarily get to look at through the magnifying glass. That's all happening, and those stresses can be very real. And, entrepreneurship is not always for the faint of heart.
Indeed.
But the upside is making your own schedule. It is being outside. It is being with animals. It is, enjoying a day like today where I had admin work and no clients, but I got to go to the barn and spend an hour and a half with my horse building that relationship.
Yes.
And although that feels like, to an outsider looking in, that could look like, oh, she's not working. But that relationship with him is strengthening for the future clients that come to the farm.
Yeah.
Because our connection and maintaining that connection is so important.
Yes, 100%.
So a lot of it looks like that. When you're in between the client hours, you are with your horses and you are doing your own learning. And that's the best perk, in my opinion.
It is for me too. I think that I don't have the kind of attention span that can just be in an office from 9 to 5. And I love that, like you today, 2-3 coaching conversations on Zoom, because not all of my coaching clients come to the horses, or, they may for a little bit, but then they do other things on Zoom. And then I get to walk out to the barn and have 2 hours with, throwing a saddle on Aiden and going into the mountain and coming back. And it's just like, wow, like that, this is a day at the office,
Yeah.
And then I'm much fresher and more present for my clients after that.
Yeah,
so,
I do think that's a really important point too, before we close, is just for people to understand the amount of energy it takes for equine practitioners like us in the equus space to hold for people is tremendous, because you are pulling information, not just from your client, from your horse, and having to oftentimes piece it together. And I think that's a skill set that EQUUS teaches for anybody that's looking to, potentially work with you or join the EQUUS organization, to understand that the capacity of what we have to hold is, I always think of like the Grinch's heart when it grows at the end of the movie. It's like that.
It is. Boing. Yeah. It's totally like that. Indeed. And we do learn to build our capacity so we can hold, all of that information that is coming in. So I'm super glad that you brought that up. And I could actually go on for another hour
I
with
know.
you, Leah.
Yeah.
So follow Leah on Instagram. It's a blast. Leah really knows how to create community, even if you're far, far away, with her life, her herd, her just way of walking in the world. And for any of you who are curious at all about becoming an EQUUS certified coach, just Kelsey will throw that in the chat. Also, it's equisinspired.com, but there's a / in there around the EECF, it's called specifically. So let's see. Let's just have a goodbye, and I will ask you if you could only name one quality that equine assisted coaching gives to others, what might that be?
Ooh, that is such a hard question. To a client, let me just clarify.
Yes, to a client. Yes.
Clarity.
Awesome. Thank
Clarity.
you so much, Leah.
Thank you, Kelly.
Bye, everybody. Thank you.
Bye.